We are badly needed and long overdue, a controversial podcast about Colorado Springs. I'm your host, Nick Raven. It's controversial because it makes sense. Over to my virtual left here, and in front of me, and over here is my co-pilot and navigator, Emily Lewis. How are you doing?
I am doing well, Nick. I'm everywhere.
You are omnipotent and omnipresent. Maybe the latter.
Yep.
Every time it hasn't happened yet because we're just starting out, but every time I hear that theme, I'm like, hell yeah.
I know. I love it. I love it.
Just knock it out of knock blocked it out of the park for us.
Yep.
So
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, 100%. I am excited. I am so excited for today's podcast.
I am too. We had such a great chat.
It was amazing.
Yeah. So we have Jax and Cully. Hang on, I have my notes here. Where did they go? I don't want to screw up her pronunciation. But Jax is a Southeast Colorado Springs bicycle advocate. Jax Armendariz. And we also have Cully Radvillas, who, as of the time that I'm recording this, is a co-founder, and I believe he's the president of Bike Colorado Springs, but I'm maybe not. He's also the president of the Organization of Westside Neighbors, so he's really in the community,
yes,
and getting involved, and
which we are all for.
We are all for community advocates on here, and I'm so happy that they were able to come on, and so far all of our guests have been able to come on and talk about the community that we're living in and building the community, and not like just trying to isolate the community, which is kind of what as city's been doing.
Yes, as a student of the world, if you will, I love the fact that every person we've had on, I have learned so much.
Yeah.
So much. And with our guest for today, I learned that I was being an asshole for no reason, which was awesome because now I won't be.
Yeah, there you go. Let's be assholes for fewer reasons. Like, we can still do it, but just not as often.
Exactly.
It's why I'm really excited about this show, is being able to entertain and expand my knowledge, but then also help people who are out there listening or watching or whatever be able to expand their knowledge, and maybe not be experts but get curious. Like this, we're kind of hang on. We are like the Wikipedia of knowledge. Like, we're not the definitive source maybe all the time, but we are the gateway drug that brings you into whatever that is.
Exactly. Because
to bring in guests like Cully and Jax and so many others.
Yeah, because there's stuff you may not know that you want to be involved in until you see or hear our podcast and you go, that's a thing I could be interested in.
Right. Absolutely.
It's great. It is great.
So this has been an interesting journey, and it's only getting more exciting from here.
It is. So many things happening.
Yeah. So with all that said, hey, let's dive into the interview. How's that sound?
Let's do it.
All right. Jackson Cully, we summon you to talk to us about bicycles. Well, hey guys, since you threatened us with it, now you have to tell us what the safety stop is.
Yes, please.
I would love for Cully to take the lead, and I'll gladly add some color about the safety stop since I've been having fun with it.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah. No, the safety stop is rad, and it basically legalizes what a lot of bicyclists have been doing for a long time, because it's the practical thing to do, because stop signs, because of their nature, make you lose your momentum, and momentum is a great thing to keep going. So what the safety stop is, it's in Colorado, it's a bill passed by the state legislature to allow cyclists to treat stop signs as yields and stop lights as stop signs. So that means exactly what it sounds like, but yield means if there's somebody else there, you yield to them. You still need to stop if there's pedestrians or drivers or somebody else that has the right of way. So it doesn't mean because you're on a bike, you can just blow through a stop sign. That's not what this law is. And
you have to pay attention to some extent.
To a large extent, right? And the onus is on you now, because if you're going to roll through it, you need to make sure it's clear. And don't be a dick, right? Like don't like just buzz pedestrians. It's something you shouldn't do anyways, but you shouldn't do that because now there's a safety stop law. That doesn't mean that now you don't have to pay attention to people walking in the crosswalk.
So, isn't that also known as like the Idaho stop?
It is. So yeah, it started in Idaho, and you'll definitely hear the naysayers with contention on, oh, it's going to make everything more dangerous, and they just imagine cyclists barreling through intersections, and Idaho and other states, while maybe a little different in terms of density than Colorado and the Front Range cities, it's everywhere it's been implemented, it's been shown to increase safety. And that's largely because it's getting cyclists out of that most dangerous area, which is the intersection. So it's getting cyclists through that intersection as quickly as possible, so that the chances of conflict are minimized. So,
Jax, you had something to add on there?
Yeah, I was going to say, the first word in this new law is safety. And so to Cully's point, it is actually about increasing safety. And again, to Cully's point, intersections are some of the most dangerous places for people on bikes. And also points for Cully repeating the number one rule of the road, which is don't be a dick, because the road is shared by bikes, cars, pedestrians. We do live in a society which I think regrettably has oriented our cities around cars instead of people.
Yep.
And
we agree.
Right. And so I know we're among friends with that. And so for me, the color that I would add as someone who often bikes in Southeast Colorado Springs is, to Cully's point, the safety stop applies when literally like there's no one around. And so in Colorado, you have crazy hills in a lot of our neighborhoods. So for someone who is trying to conquer the hills in my neighborhood, the safety stop has been a pretty cool addition to my experience on the road, knowing that I wouldn't necessarily, I'm not doing something illegal. And on top of that, I think when we're talking about the safety stop and why people like Cully and I want to bring it up is because there's so much work to be done around really kind of the cultural aspects. And we have to talk about the safety stop, because if someone is on their porch and they're like, look at that asshole biker, they just blew through that stop sign, they suck, without knowing that the safety stop is actually a law and that cyclist was well within their rights. Like, that's a part of the engagement that folks like us who want to spread the joy of bikes to the world have to do. There's some mental framing that needs to change. Cully, what do you think?
Yeah, most definitely. And we've had people since the safety stop was passed, and we've utilized it, people behind us, drivers that aren't interacting with the intersection, but just because they think they know what the rules are, say, it's a stop sign, you need to stop there. And my wife, being very boisterous, has let them know that it's changed.
The law is different.
Yeah, and I think that all comes down to, like, I think it's great for us to get out the message, and like, because we get it out to the cyclists and we get it out to the people that ride and everything, but that doesn't get to the general public
No,
in the way that it needs to.
I understand.
No,
yeah,
in fact, go ahead, Nick.
No, Emily, it's
I
yours.
was just gonna say I'm one of those that Jax called out a second ago. Watched a guy on a bike this morning, just kind of go through the. No, he stopped at the red light and then went, and I was like, "That's illegal." No, apparently not. Thank you very much.
So that's why we're here. We're just informing you. We're doing our part.
That way I won't smack talk the bikers anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not running out to yell at them or anything. I'm just like, that was illegal.
I have not been on a bicycle in a very long time, and so
Yes.
when I see guys like you that take this so seriously, and advocate for the change in ordinances and laws and just general awareness so that people are less afraid, I think, man, it'd be great if I owned a bicycle, but at the same time, the idea of running down Academy, like dominating a lane on my my city cruiser is
We
one
don't
of the most
recommend that.
terrifying fucking thing I can think of.
Nobody
But at the
wants
same
to do
time,
that. Yeah.
as an avid pedestrian, being having this pro like form-fitting shirt on with the helmet on, and he's like doing 50 down the sidewalk, it's like, we got to figure out something here. There's got to be something better about how Colorado Springs treats its bikes, and I know we have plenty of examples. Jax, do you want to speak to that? Just kick us off.
Thank you for that, because when you reference Academy, you're likely largely referencing the part of Academy that's in my neighborhood, which is some of the most dangerous intersections in the city. We have the intersection of Astrazon and Academy, where there have been multiple pedestrians, and there's also been bicycle deaths in my neighborhood, and in fact all around our city. And so I think two quick points that come to my mind when we're talking about infrastructure and bike lanes. There is an issue again of the point of reference that people have, because it turns into a scarcity mentality that somehow adding bike lanes detracts. And there's so much, and Cully, this is your cue, I'll pass the mic in a second, but there's so much data evidence about how building more accommodating streets that welcome bikes and pedestrians and are people-centered are better for our health, our mental health, our community connectivity. I could go on. And so when it comes to my neighborhood, Nick, what you're pointing out is that Academy, that started out as like a state highway, I believe. And so the way that it's designed is antiquated, and it has slowly but surely, there have been upgrades. We're excited to see that there will be a pedestrian controlled crosswalk button for our Sand Creek Trail next to Academy.
Oh, nice.
And off of Hancock. So we're seeing trail connectivity. We're seeing those improvements, but by far my neighborhood is one of those areas that you described. There's a technical term for it, Cully, correct me, but it's basically the level of comfort and safety a user experiences on the roadway. And so you're right, Nick, Academy in more than one place has a very low level of confidence for pedestrian and bicycle users. And I just want to add simply too that when it comes to places like my neighborhood, which are typically described as underserved, like historically the data shows that we've been underserved, there is sometimes a conversation around bike lanes being a sign of like gentrification. And again, somehow bike lanes like detracting from quality of life or the neighborhood. But I would really spend this moment sharing that is again a scarcity mentality. And when you think of bike lanes simply creating more accessibility, because there are people who have to use wheels that we don't think about when we're rallying against bike lanes, So, Cully, what do you think?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Thank
you for the banquet, Jax.
Yeah.
That's me.
No,
I heard that.
Starting, I guess, with the kind of the idea of bike lanes as a sign of gentrification and and maybe something that disadvantaged communities or communities of color may not necessarily want. I don't. One of the most dangerous things about bicycle advocacy is it's advocacy of white men a lot of the time, and that's why we're really glad to have Jax as part of that, and
Yes.
some diversity in it's as like the stereotypical cyclist, it's kind of hard for me to advocate for other communities. But one of the aspects that I wanted to bring up is that I've heard that there are the view of a bicycle as a form of transportation for disadvantaged communities, for lack of a better term, is sometimes viewed poorly because they think that's the poor people's version of transportation, and we need to work to change that culture, and that culture can't change until there's safe places for people to ride. So kind of bringing it all back together, the Southeast is notoriously dangerous for anybody not in a car, and dangerous for drivers as well. Like it's unsafe for anybody getting around on any form of transportation, and it has the lowest income populations, making it to Nick. I know it's a passion of yours. Public transportation in the city is lacking as well. So unless you have a personal automobile, which let's get this out there, that a personal automobile is a luxury that is really expensive.
It is.
If you don't have
insurance, registration, the gas, all of it.
Maintenance.
Yeah. The car itself, the gas, the registration, maintenance, everything plays into this really, really high cost of ownership, which is mandatory to participate in society, right? And that's not, I think we're all on the same page that that's not the society we want, but that's the society and the development pattern that we've had in our city for
ever.
Yeah, for so long.
For a
long time. So
I'm kind of in the scope right now where it's like, well, you know what? I can afford rent, or I can own a vehicle, and I can do one or the other, but I can't do both. And I'm thankful that the bus line that I take, for the most part, takes me within 4 blocks of work. It takes me within half a block of home. But I'm also one of the fortunate people where that's the case. Because there's definitely entire webs. You just look at the system map and we'll come back to bicycles. But if you're not within this 15-minute sphere of these lines, you're walking, you're bicycling, and in that case, I'm really glad that buses do have the bike rack up front so that you can switch modes as you need to get places. And you talked a really good point about the economics of it. It's like the success of transportation, especially multimodal in a city like ours, isn't weighed on how many people who are vulnerable and have less income are able to afford cars, but rather rich people using public transportation because it's more convenient. If the public transportation, if bicycling, if walking is more convenient than bringing out your car to go to Walgreens or some stupid bullshit like that, then all the better. That's better for everyone. And there are so many advantages in having infrastructure that is based on bicycles because they don't weigh 9,000 pounds. They aren't weighing down the infrastructure and causing it to buckle year after year. Emily?
Yeah, talking about going back to kind of the economics of bicycles, and I think we have 2 very distinct groups of people that use bicycles. We have the more financially challenged that use bikes because having a car is just not something that's available. And then we have the much more well off financially that, yes, they have the 2-car garage and is full of cars, but I'm just going to take my bike to work, kind of thing. And trying to bring those two groups together, I can imagine, is not an easy thing to do. And having been in the have not camp for a decent portion of my life, I know that, as Cully was saying, that the poorer people see riding a bike is like, that's not, you can't let people see you ride a bike because then they're going to think you're poor.
Right.
Unless
Right.
it's a super expensive bike and you're decked out in all of the biker glory for that.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious how you guys go about rectifying those two groups, or if you do. Yes.
Sure. I'll take a swing first, Cully, if you don't mind. But I think you're right, Emily. There's a spectrum there, and those are the extremes of it. There are definitely people in the middle, like myself, where I started off at one point making what a starting teacher's salary makes, and for me, a bike became an instrument during the pandemic of like mental health medicine. Yeah. So I think there's everything in between, but you're right, there are extremes. And in my experience, some of the work that I've tried to do, another shout out to a great bicycle advocacy organization in our town is Kids on Bikes. They have a couple of bike libraries which have served to create a space where we can bring all those different types of folks and families together, because the bike library has allowed us to reach people who don't have the income or the means, and they can just borrow the equipment for the day, so they don't have to feel like there's an obstacle to them riding the trail, Sand Creek Trail that's in their backyard. And because we have such a great advocacy community, there have been the organizations that have come in, and Bike Colorado Springs has sent their ambassadors to the rides that we do for the community in Southeast. And so that has served as a really wonderful kind of opportunity to mix those different types of bike users. And you're not wrong though, like we touched on it earlier, like I am very aware that most of the people engaging in this advocacy don't share the same cultural background as me. And so that's certainly been a factor. And I'd love to shout out Medicine Wheel Trail Advocates as well, that they've reached out and tried to do the work to recognize like we're not as diverse as we could be or should be. And so there are groups in Colorado Springs that are doing this advocacy work, thinking about that. So to your question, Emily, the good news is like there is work being done to address that. So what do you think, Kelly?
Well, real quick, we actually my youngest Spawn, when they were in,
I love you to call
like when they were in elementary school, like 6th grade, 5th, 6th grade, they actually went through the Kids on Bikes program.
Yeah.
And that they got their bike and everything else and used it for years. Because that age they grow weird. So it fit for a while. Well, they just grow weird. And so we were able to take advantage of Kids on Bikes, which I think is a fantastic organization that we have out here. I used to live down on Tremont in the what is it? I can't think of the neighborhood. Hang on one second. Roswell, the old Roswell neighborhood. They're off of Fillmore. And that backs up onto one of the trail systems. And I know that there's a big Kids on Bikes like thing over there for a bridge or something. And it's really interesting to see. But because kids don't really have the space so much anymore, or the safety to ride their bikes like we did. Showing my age here. When I was coming up, when we were on our bikes all day in the neighborhood, and it was fine. And now you have to be so much more careful with that because there's a billion cars and people don't pay attention.
And they're bigger and faster than ever. Cully, I'd also like to ask you about your thoughts on like classism and bike ownership as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot there. The one thing I wanted to kind of touch on, the whole cycling clothing aesthetic, like a cyclist versus a.
And I'll tell you, runners are the same way. We have those compression shirts, and they're so hot. They're the only way I look beautiful. Anyway.
But there's I'm not completely alone here, but I'm fairly small, at least in the advocacy realm, of being a guy who pretty adamantly, unless I'm going out on a mountain bike ride, wears street clothes when I ride my bike. Like that's what I do for a few different reasons. For one, I don't want to look silly when I get to a place. Check one, because a lot of the times I'm using that's a transportation trip. Like, you don't put on your driving clothes to get in your car and go to the store, right? Like you just get in the car and go to the store.
You just get in the car and go to the store.
Yeah.
Right. But I've seen stories and I think some research on how when a cyclist is wearing spandex and clothes that are very cyclist clothes, it kind of dehumanizes that person to a driver, because it's easy for a driver to look at that cyclist and say, oh, that's a cyclist. That's not a person. That's a cyclist. And I'm not trying to victim blame in any way, but it's also comes to those memes that I've seen all over the internet of like high-vis traffic calming devices hit, or like high-vis doesn't solve all, right? Like if you paint it neon green, it's not preventing a car from hitting you. So all the memes that say, oh, that building should have been wearing more high vis and and riding more predictably.
Right. Yeah, as we kind of talked about it a bit in our walking podcast, which is not even out as of the time. So we're time traveling here a bit, but it's really great. Doc Brown here. But being a pedestrian kind of sucks, and especially sucks on intersections when cars are making free right turns, and you have to like head on a swivel, be making sure that the people making U-turns are okay, the people making the right turns are okay, because if you screw up, like, you're dead, but if they screw up, you are definitely dead or seriously mangled. And again, the cars are getting bigger, they're getting faster, stuff like that. So there's a safety concern. Have you guys run into any safety concerns recently, especially as the vehicle mix is changing a good bit here in town? And maybe you guys have some input on that. We'll go to Jax first.
I mean, it's less input and more of a confession that, the other day I was downtown using the new infrastructure, the Union Avenue Bridge, and coming up on, I think that's Vermijo. And, we were going with traffic. We were in our rights, and sure enough, there was a crosswalk light that was for our direction of traffic, and there was this giant truck that started to cut us off. And I'll admit, like I said, more of a confession, I did not do well in being gentle and letting them know that the crosswalk signal was on for people. And so, if anything, what I can offer is a bit of validation, Nick, unfortunately, regarding not only does it happen pedestrians, but it obviously happens to people on bikes too.
Right.
And if anything, though, I almost would say I it may sound counterintuitive, but I almost feel safer on a bike because I can at least like book it really fast if I need to. I can hit my brakes really hard if I see and jump and do my jump off my bike if I need to, if I see a car coming. But as a pedestrian, I recognize you feel even more vulnerable, I think. So
yeah, I feel that every single time. I'm like, there's that car that's like kind of nudged out into the crosswalk, and you're like, okay, I can do a roll forward, I think, and it's only gonna hurt my head a little bit. Maybe I can leap back. No, I can't leap back. I have to. So there's like a 7-step process in there.
Yes,
Cully, have you had some fun, in air quotes here, run-ins with vehicles who are not paying the fuck attention?
For sure. So, and what makes it, I guess, more frightening. So, if listeners don't know,
I guess we don't.
I think it froze.
Did it freeze? Yeah. I lost it.
Yeah.
Darn it.
Oh no.
Yeah. Let's we'll give him a second.
Well, I mean, at least he didn't freeze in a stupid way.
Yeah.
He looks really thoughtful right there.
We heard you for a second there, I think. No?
No, he's froze.
He did the freeze.
He did.
Wow.
Oh, there he is.
You lost me.
Yeah.
I'm back.
It was great. It was
You had a very thoughtful look on your face,
you were
very philosophical.
I'm going to leap into this discussion point. But first, I need to prepare the internet. Just give me a moment. Anyway.
My thoughts are too strong for this internet connection, apparently.
I guess.
So anyway, you were going to say...
So, I was talking about my big, ridiculous, awesome cargo bike that we haul our whole family around in, which has the benefit of being weird. So it gets people to pay attention to it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But it's also scary in that it's my whole family on this somewhat vulnerable contraption that if a car isn't paying attention, they're going to take us all out. And we were pedaling from our house to White Pie on Castilla there. And there was a car turning left onto Tejon and just it looked like they were going to turn right into us. I don't know if they were just slowly coasting and were trying to time it. But again, my boisterous wife got a good yell at them and made them aware of their misjudgment.
Yeah. That's why
another confession. I like bikes for the same reasons as maybe Cully's wife, Haley, because I can speed by and let people know what I think if they're in the bike lane. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not saying I wouldn't want to, dishonor cyclists and make us look bad, but I will let people know when you are parked in the bike lane, like that is not okay.
Yeah, sometimes you just gotta tell someone to fuck off. Where are you, Emily? What happened? What is going on? Did you turn invisible?
I'm dealing with dog issues off camera.
Oh, all right. That's fine.
So, because I am a scooter user, what are y'all's thoughts on the scooters in the bike lanes? Either one. Jack.
Can you say what in the bike lanes? A scooter?
Scooters.
The scooters.
Scooter? Yeah.
Scooters, right? The share scooters.
Yeah, like the
like the Lime or the Veo or something.
Yeah, those are for you too. Mm-hmm. You've got wheels. And then, you know what I think makes it a little confusing for people, and Cully, I mean, I would be glad to hear your thoughts on this too, but like, it's my understanding that really it's downtown that technically, like legally, you cannot be on sidewalk. That's why they have the stencils on downtown. But outside of downtown, wheels on sidewalks are fair game. Is that right?
Yep, exactly. It's downtown and like OCC proper, Old Colorado City proper.
Yeah.
The only places that technically you're not allowed to ride on the sidewalks, but any other part of the city, bikes, scooters, whatever you got, pretty much, I guess.
Okay.
Probably don't want to open up complete fair game, but I think there's a technical term for it, but low speed mobility devices, something like that. I forgot
So if I take my Polaris ATV and put it in first, like I can.
You're good.
Okay. All right. That's
off
great.
you go. Zippy
About
zippy.
that one.
Speaking of infrastructure, one of the big things, especially out of John Suthers, our mayor's first terms, I was living in Briargate when he did the bike lane test around research, which was basically this painted lane. They actually had like the spoke. The Ballard obstructions to protect the lane. The painting was very sloppy. I've actually got a picture. It looks like someone was drunk and they were like painting the lane up at some point. And the neighbors hated it, and there was like hardly ever any bikes on there. But I remember that was a big push early on for Suthers to be like, we can make this a mobility city. We can open this up to bicycle transit, and within, I don't know, it was like 6 or 8 months, they tore the whole thing out, stripped out everything, brought that lane back, because people are so afraid of lane dieting, and I'm sure we could get at it in a second. But ever since then, aside from, like, I think we've seen, and I know you guys are far more experienced, but we've seen the development of bike infrastructure downtown, which is spotty, but everywhere else in the suburb, there's basically nothing. Like around major thoroughfares like Union, Austin Bluff, stuff like that. And obviously South Academy, I'm up towards Central Academy, and it sucks there too. But I wanted to hear your thoughts on like bike infrastructure, Cully.
Yeah, so that the research, that's a can of worms. That was Bike Colorado Springs, one of our first like big advocacy pushes, because we were asked by the city to help with that. So I'll go into it in a few different ways. For one, we think there needs to be bike connectivity all over the city. It's not something that should be reserved only for the older parts of town, downtown, Manitou, whatever. It should be something that people all over the city, whether they're in suburban areas or more urban, traditional developed areas, can take advantage of and can feel safe riding a bike. That's not the case today, and that's not the case in Briargate. And that was so that was part of the intention with the road diet, the bike lanes there. Really, the reason they wanted to do it is there was too much roadway right of way, and speeding was high, and they were looking to slow down traffic, and a road diet would do that, or did do that, without reducing travel times, really. But they did it almost at the expense of bicycle infrastructure. The bike infrastructure wasn't great and wasn't all that well implemented. It was a pilot project, so it was just kind of like let's test this out, see if it works. It didn't. But the other aspect of that is there wasn't a way to safely get to it or from it. Like it was a bridge to nowhere kind of.
Island.
It was 100%. I remember that. It was like, here is this really interesting piece and well thought out portion of bicycle infrastructure, but it doesn't connect to anything. It doesn't do anything. So no wonder bicyclists aren't use it unless they literally live on that block. Because how the hell are they going to get to it? It makes no sense.
And so I think this brings up a really good point, that the thoroughfares like Research and Academy and even Nevada, those are thoroughfares, and there's businesses built along those thoroughfares. So it does make sense to have bike connections along those thoroughfares because that's where all the destinations are.
Yes.
The problem being the rights of way, or getting access to rights of way on those thoroughfares and making them feel safe, is really difficult when they're high-speed roads and crossing 6-lane, 6, 8, 10-lane intersections. Like
the danger zone.
It's a really hard problem to solve. So, we've been advocating for bike infrastructures along some of those thoroughfares because we want people to be able to access those amenities. But as you probably know, a painted bike lane is much, much, much cheaper than a proper protected bike lane, which everybody would want to.
Is that how that works?
Is this about money? Is that what you're saying, Cully?
What?
Right.
And if I may, something that popped in my mind while Cully was speaking, and this is a pretty, I think, decent segue, is that I often wonder too about the tension when it comes to infrastructure development, and we're thinking about multimodal, right? But for our purposes, we're talking bikes. But when you think about the trail systems and the investment that takes, because that's such a critical piece of connectivity. But so the tension between that, as well as the necessary investment that Cully is describing, is like, well, you've got to develop infrastructure where the people are as well. And then it takes a level of complexity to create infrastructure that attracts people because they actually feel safe using it. And so all that is to say is preaching to the choir there, but there are layers of complexity to this that lend to this being a challenge to advocate around, because it's a really cool issue and that, like, wow, it's hyper local. And so people can get pretty spicy about something like, this is my backyard, right? Yeah. And you almost want to think that you could almost engage neutrally on this, but the truth is that's not quite the case. And so there's a lot of moving parts to getting what we want to see as people who believe in the benefits of reorienting our infrastructure toward people, not cars. So at least we have the solidarity of one another, and podcasts like Badly Needed and Longly Overdue.
Oh, yes. Yes, thank God for those guys.
Yes. I know. Geez, where have they been forever?
I know. It's like they're badly needed and long overdue at the same time. Like, criminy.
Like they talk about things that are badly needed and long overdue.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, 100%.
There's absolutely a point for advocacy, and like I said, the idea, like, I'll be downtown and I'll be like, man, I could think about riding a bike right now, but then it's like a block down the road, I'm gonna be fighting someone, or I'm gonna be up on the sidewalk, or something like that. And getting bike infrastructure out to the suburb is a really big deal, because I know that you could kind of ride so many of those side streets, like Old North End, stuff like that, out through the middle there. Nob Hill, you could ride that pretty easily, but it is so inconsistent, and there seems to have just been a lack of political will. And to your point earlier, when I did the interview for CTAB, one of the questions was, like, I don't know the exact phrasing, but it was like, how do you deal with people who see this as a zero-sum thing, where it's like, in order for bikes, multimodal scooters, pedestrians, stuff like that, how do you set it so that when they get infrastructure, when you do lane dieting and stuff like that, that people who are driving cars don't feel like victimized? And it's like, none of this is
They're gonna feel victimized. It's fine.
They're gonna feel victimized
no matter what.
No matter what.
Yeah.
But the point was, like, this isn't about taking away from cars, it's about giving to people who don't have cars. This is the equity here is in not stealing or degrading or diminishing the point of an automobile, because no matter what the situation is, no matter how perfectly utopian our future communist city is going to be, there's still going to be people who own cars and want to get out for the weekend, and they're going to want to use the roads in that way. So it's not about stealing away from the people who have just invested $7,000 a month in their newest electric vehicle. It's about allowing people to get around who want an easier commute, who then have the availability to have an easier commute, be able to ride a fucking bicycle. Like, seriously, I should be able to just ride a bicycle to work. Why can't I do that safely? No, I have these death zones everywhere I go where it's just 6 lanes of 70 mile per hour, traffic that will murder me instantly. And I just want to a scooter or whatever.
Hopping on a bike and feeling like you're taking your life into your hands. And, at that point, I'm just going to stay home.
Yep.
I'm just going to stay home.
It's kind of scary in that regard, yeah.
So you're not alone in that. I don't know if you guys, it's a term that has been around bike advocacy for a long time. I forgot who did the study initially, but there's basically 4 different groups of cyclists. So there's the strong and fearless, the enthused and confident, and then the interested but concerned. That's 3. I did my math wrong, but
you got so far, Cully.
I was so close.
And then there's the hell no category because things are really dangerous.
Yeah, but so interested and concerned is 84% of people surveyed. So that's a huge amount of people, which both you and Nick fall into, right? Like that's what who we're trying to get with our advocacy. We're trying to bring in the people who they like bikes, they want to ride bikes, but they don't feel safe doing it in where they live.
Not.
Yeah,
absolutely not.
So it's a huge problem and something I think everybody in the bike advocacy realm is trying to address, but and I'm sure, I don't know if you've covered this in this terminology in the past on this podcast, but car culture, like it comes down to car culture
100%,
and being planned around, like North American cities being planned around cars as the only mode of transportation. Yeah, exactly.
And it's the same, like
stock,
like electric. You can complain about Tesla and Bezos and Rivian and all that stuff all you want, like more power to you, but like
we can do that. We can do a whole podcast.
That's another episode. Let's not get excited here. Slow down, Emily. But
I get to rant.
Yeah, I know. The idea of having, like, if you just took every single car and replaced it with this very silent EV, even though that would hurt the infrastructure more because they're heavier and stuff like that, just the silence. Like, I do not ever need to hear your exhaust note. I don't care how cool you are. I don't care how awesome your Camaro is or your import that you just got because they're legally available now and it took so long because it's been sitting in a garage in Osaka. I totally get, but I don't ever want to hear your exhaust note or see your truck flag. But the idea
none of those.
it's not just, it's so easy to get locked into the transit component of it, right? Like the connect COS bit, but it's beyond just making lanes available to people. It's around plotting the entire city around the idea that you don't have to go half a mile to Walgreens. You don't have to go a mile in the other way to a grocery store. Those things should be denser. We should be thinking about that. And I know Cully, that we're fans here of not just bikes. He's Canadian. He's based out of Amsterdam now, but he reflects on just how awful not just the transit situation is, but the city planning component behind it, where it's not just that you have this vehicle that will get you a mile. It's not, now they've built a city where you have to drive a mile to get to anywhere important, and that increases the deserts of food and health and so forth.
I was going to bring up not just bikes. Thanks for beating me to it. But you mentioned that how we can talk about multimodal infrastructure as not a zero-sum game. And Not Just Bikes has an episode about how the Netherlands is both the top city for bicycling and the top city for driving, because not everybody that needs to get around needs to drive.
Right.
There's plenty of people who don't want to drive. Like, that's not their ideal form of transportation. And when you make everybody drive, it brings out the worst of a lot of people, and makes it so basically in the Netherlands, people who are taking public transportation, people are walking, people are riding bikes, and that allows the people who need to or desire driving as their preferred mode of transportation. It gives them less traffic on the road when they choose to get around that way. So,
yeah, people seem to forget that if more people are bicycling, if more people are using the bus, if more people are walking, that means less cars. There's less cars and trucks on the road if people have a viable option to anything other than a car to accomplish anything. And people don't get that. They just think, you're taking my freedom because I can't take my jacked up truck, down to the flea market. That's half a block away and I could have walked it, but I'm afraid of people. It also, like, and I've said it other way, but it's like, it also fosters a kind of societal paranoia as well. And that's a whole thing by itself, is you start becoming afraid of people when you are going from your 3,000-pound metal box to your house, and then back to your 3,000-pound metal box to your office, and then back. You're isolating yourself. Whereas with a bicycle, whereas with a pedestrian, you are out in the open and you're experiencing that, and you're experiencing things in human scale.
And Nick, I mean, that's where the term cager comes from, right? Because there's this car culture mentality of folks who are rather, like, even emotionally, right, like personally attached to the car, when really it's trapping their ideas too, right, in a steel cage. Their minds aren't as open. And I've actually loved, Cully was the first one who brought this to my attention. You didn't know this, Cully, but we were in some discussion, our internet stuff, and Cully brought up the fact, which is what you were alluding to, Nick, which is that bikes actually create community. Walking creates community. Yeah. The connectivity, yes, we want connectivity of transportation, but goods and services, capitalism, right? But imagine just being connected to your neighbors too. So that's one element about bikes and the advocacy behind it that I love, which is, an added payoff. And as I was listening to Cully speak, about a culture that forces everyone to drive, like, let's name that. That is really an equity issue, because there are people who have accessibility needs, family situations, income issues, that there's a reason that they can't drive. And so the last thing, as I was listening to, all the great chatter here, is about these issues, I would like to point out, for example, what I've been thinking about, mulling over a bit, is just, why is it that Denver County and Pueblo County both have e-bike programs, and El Paso County right in between of those, with the exception, I guess, if you want to call Count Douglas or whatever. But I'm just saying, there's two counties on the Front Range that have e-bike programs, and the largest county, I get that, El Paso County, there's a lot to cover. There are issues related to that. But I think that we should be a little bit embarrassed that we aren't having those conversations when the programs in Denver County, and I don't know as much about Pueblo, but I understand that, especially in Denver, they've been quite successful.
They have been.
Yeah, I actually got a press release the other day that, like, Denver immediately ran out of their vouchers for e-bikes, and I'm sitting there like, and it was like up to, I don't know, it was like up to $1,700 or something for an e-bike, and I'm like, God, I would totally hop on. I would conquer my anxiety and fear with an e-bike, right? That, and I'm working in and out of Manitou this past week for a story I'm working on for the Indie about Manitou, and there are so many people. Like Manitou is just this perfect example. In large part of this multimodal of people own e-bikes instead of cars. Like they haven't had cars in forever, and they use their e-bike to even get up those hills in Manitou, because some of them are pretty nuts. They're pretty nuts out here sometimes, but it gets pretty nuts. And so there's this equity that builds when people are in a human scale, when you can walk anywhere within 20 minutes and you have basically everything. Now, granted, the grocery store is outside of town, that Safeway there. But, but here we could be fostering that, and you need that top level thing there. Cully.
Yeah, that's not Cully. E-bikes was the topic I wanted to touch on, and I'm glad you brought it up. And
I got your back, Cully.
Yeah, Nick, you're 100% right. Like, e-bikes neutralize the things that keep people from wanting to ride bikes. Like, so in Colorado Springs and our area, it's hills, right? That's a huge one. And then there's also our sprawling nature. And so e-bikes remove a little bit of that sprawl, because you could go a little bit faster, you can go a little bit further, and you can put in a little bit less effort, and it can be that difference that you need to make a 5-mile trip viable, where it would have been inconceivable on a regular pedal bike. And so I'm 100% supportive of e-bikes, and I don't want to get into all the nitty gritty on what holding back our parks department from implementing their e-bike pilot that they were planning to do over a year ago on the rail network, but it's related to the language around the TOPS ordinance in Colorado Springs. But right now we can have Class 1 e-bikes on any urban trails, but not Class 2 legally. But there's no enforcement. So
the cop's gonna pull you over on the trail cops.
No,
they're gonna pull you over on your e-bike.
Exactly. So, again, went on a tangent there, but I think the more we can make e-bikes viable pieces of transportation tools in Colorado Springs, the better. And I live on Pikes Peak Avenue right here on the west side, and that's kind of one of the bike thoroughfares. Yeah, and it's incredible how many more e-bikes we've seen in the last 3 years. Like with COVID plus e-bikes, just the technology getting better, they getting lower cost. E-bikes have become ubiquitous here, and especially as a transportation is and recreation as well. Yeah. From the rebate aspect, it's super frustrating, and it's really our political environment in Colorado Springs and Nassau County, right? Like,
right.
The gerrymandering of the county commissioner seats so that it's only conservatives on county commission is really, really frustrating, and it leads to a place where we can't make progress in those things that, for better or for worse, are controversial issues, which getting people access to easier, cheaper, less damaging forms of transportation, shouldn't be a controversial issue, but
it shouldn't be.
It is.
And Jack, you mentioned those 3 counties specifically, and I believe or even those municipalities, we're like the only one that has its own self-taber of those, if I recall correctly. So it's like, we can't spend a penny more, or imagine the fight last ballot when Southers is like, yo, can we please hold on to the Tabor refund because we need to mitigate wildfires, which I don't know about you guys, but with this whole climate change thing happening and that massive Marshall Fire in January.
They don't talk about climate
scary.
change.
I know. We have gerrymandered science out of our jurisdiction. It's incredible.
Exactly.
It's great. But yeah, there is absolutely a lack of political will to want to enact that because, what member of city council is using a bike or wants to use a bike? I'm sure more are more sympathetic to that, and the mayor doesn't give a shit, so whatever.
No.
So whatever. I guess we can wind down here.
Save it for TikTok, Nick. Save it for TikTok.
God, I know. Jax, is there something that we got in here that maybe we missed or something that it's been on your mind while we've been chatting that we should get out before we head out of here?
Thank you. I think in large part, we named a lot of what I was hoping to talk about, but I would take a quick bite on kind of the last thread that we were on in terms of political will, and would just tap into my perpetual optimism because I have to, and my love of solidarity in that this group here and those that we're connected to largely recognize that political will is going to be part of the necessary formula for seeing the change that we want. Everything, that's a wide spectrum, but for the purposes of today, infrastructure and
yes.
showing bikes love. So this will be my soapbox, and for those that know me, which is to say, consider running for your local office, consider adopting a candidate that represents what you want to see in your community. I truly believe that all politics is local, they say, and your city, your county, that's really the most direct entry into government as a citizen, a resident that you can make. So hold them accountable. So I would like to sign off with that.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Cully.
Yeah, so I like Jax's idea of optimism, and I want to bring some optimism to this picture. I know there's a lot of negative, and you need the negative to think about how you can improve, right? Like, but there's a lot of awesome things about bicycle transportation in Colorado Springs. And so moving here from Chicago in 2012, the first thing I noticed was our urban trail network. And we mentioned it kind of in passing, but our urban trail network is incredible, and
yes, it is.
It's very much based on where you live. So if you don't live near an urban trail, you're kind of screwed. But if you live near an urban trail like me, and your work is near an urban trail like me, then you can ride urban trail for 85% of your commute, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of places that don't have those urban trails serving them, and which is why the on-street connections are all that much more important, bringing people to those safe, comfortable connections. And talking about those on-street connections, that's gotten incredibly better in the last 10 years that I've been here, with Cascade, Weber Street. We're not perfect. I'm not going to say that, but we've made a ton of strides and have gotten to a place that's much more bikeable for the general population, at least around downtown core, versus where it was 10 years ago.
Oh, easily.
Yeah. So there's a ton of stuff to celebrate, and then some looks into the future. There's some really exciting trail projects coming up. The north end of the Legacy Loop, connecting from the Popsicle Bridge to where Rock Island Trail starts. That's going to happen this year. That's what Parks Department's been saying. So that's that's a super excited one that they've been teasing us with for the last, I don't know, 5-10 years. Yeah. And then there's, I think you're not quite in this far east, Nick, but Powers Underpass at Sand Creek is going to be started this year as well. So that's that's going to also link up to the Rock Island Trail. So there's some projects that have been on the books for a long time that are actually coming to fruition this year that are really exciting and will extend some of that connectivity that the older parts of town have been able to take advantage of, extend that to other places that have been underserved with bike infrastructure, at least in the past. So those are my big things. The other thing, the reason I got involved in bike advocacy is I want to see that culture change that we've been talking about. I want bikes to be accepted as a viable form of transportation in Colorado. I don't want people to look at you like weird when you ride a bike with your family. I want them to think, oh, okay, somebody's riding their bike with their family, just as they would look at somebody driving a car to a restaurant or something like that. Yeah. So that's my goal with all the work I do, and it's a tough thing to change, but it's that's my hope.
And I share some optimism there, and especially as we're getting to Banning Lewis and we're wrapping up Connect COS for this year, is that so that Banning Lewis doesn't get fucked up and then just become 6-lane roads everywhere with low density housing everywhere. They actually, since we have that whole naked space of real estate, we can actually think about transit and multimodal in the way that we should ahead of time, instead of having to tear everything up later at the cost of hundreds of millions of dollars and figure it out then. Emily, did you have some final thoughts?
I'm listening to everyone in their optimism, and I've been here since 1979. I would love to see these changes happen in the Springs. I do know that it's definitely fighting an uphill battle, and I will say I am optimistic that change can happen. And I'll just leave it right there.
Bravo.
I like it, everybody. Yeah.
Jax, Cully, thank you so much for being on our little show.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you guys so much. It was great to actually put faces to Facebooky things. Yes.
And bicycles.
Bicycles.
Thank you guys.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Have a great evening, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
You too. Bye.
Thank you so much to Jax and Cully for hanging out with us and being able to talk to us about bicycles. Obviously, for you and me, there was gaps in our knowledge, and
absolutely
to be able to, like we were talking about earlier before the show, all that time ago, being able to understand new things and slide that in and figure stuff out and be bigger advocates for people who ride on bicycles. And
because going back to my asshole moment, not understanding about the safety stop,
the Idaho stop,
and that was, now I don't get to yell at bicyclers who do it, because no, it's not against the law and they're allowed. It's fine.
Not anymore. It's relatively recently, so it's who's really to blame here. And we're gonna have future multimodal episodes. We haven't gone through all of them yet, but buses is another one, and obviously that's huge heckin' deal to me. So that's another episode, and we'll have some cool guests as well to figure that out. So anyway, Emily, do you want to get us out of here?
Yes, I do.
All right.
Badly Needed and Long Overdue is a podcast about shaking things up in a conservative city. This show is hosted by Nick Raven. Nope, other side. Nick Raven.
Other side.
And myself, Emily Lewis. You can watch the video version of this show on YouTube and listen to us in podcast form everywhere you find your podcasts. You can also reach us on a bunch of different social media platforms like Instagram at Badly Needed Podcast. Cannot speak.
Podcast.
And I know I forgot it. I'm going to go back.
All right. Keep going. Let's go. Yeah.
On Twitter at Badly Needed COS. On Facebook at Badly Needed and Long Overdue Podcast. On TikTok. Yes, we TikTok. At Badly Needed Podcasts. And our theme song, which is amazing, by the way, is brought to you by the Knock Blockers, who is a local ska band. Very awesome. Highly recommend you go find them on social media.
Excellent. We are Badly Needed and Long Overdue. And we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Pew.